Thank you so much for taking time out of what I know is a very busy day. So we really, really do appreciate it. 18 years ago, the American Chamber launched the Women of Influence Committee and the Women of Influence Awards. 17 years ago, the globally respected architect, courageous business leader, and chair and founder of Moser Associates, Moira Moser, won the Women of Influence Award for Entrepreneur of the Year. Amazing, we still have it here behind us today. I consider myself very, very lucky to be talking to Moira today about how she has navigated the world of design to grow Moser Associates into a leading architectural firm that is transforming the way people work. Whether you're dialing in from home, whether you're in transit, in the office, whether you're on a running machine, maybe you're at a standing desk, or maybe you're surrounded by really comfy cushions, the way we work and where we work is changing. And Moira and her teams at Moser Associates have always had their finger on the pulse of workplace change. So strap yourselves in. We're going on a whirlwind tour of Moira's journey across the years to where she is now and what the future looks like from our chairs sitting here in her Hong Kong office. And we really, really do want to hear from you as well. So please do send your questions into the chat box, and I'll make sure that we have time to pick up a couple of your questions later on. So Moira has very kindly set us up with a cozy fire for our fireside chat. We have the award all ready and set to go. And this is a nod to her American Chamber roots. We also have a suite of very inspiring slides and some clips for you to see. And we'll be seeing some of the projects that the amazing women at Moser have led. So I think we're set up and ready to go. Let's go. Let's start 17 years ago when you were first awarded the Entrepreneur of the Year award. What did Moser Associates look like then? And how has it developed since?
Well, first of all, thank you, Jo, and thank you for those very kind words. In 2004, we had 9 offices and around 400 staff. That was when I received the award. Now, in 2021, we have 25 locations and 1,200 staff. But more important than those numbers, it is the expansion, the growth of the services that we provide that is really most important.
And so that entrepreneurial spirit and having to adapt and grow is still very much there.
Definitely. The entrepreneurial spirit has not left us.
Okay. I also understand that your mantra is keep going, which I absolutely love. But I'm interested to know, when did you first discover architecture, and were there any hurdles that got in your way early on, or tried to get in your way with your keep going mantra in mind?
Well, when I was 9 years old, I decided to become an architect. I loved looking at my mother's Better Homes and Gardens magazines with the beautiful homes and the beautiful people. And I wanted to create wonderful environments where people would have wonderful experiences. And actually that focus has never left me. And my parents never discouraged me. They never told me that architecture was for men, not for women.
Thank goodness.
But I didn't get much encouragement in high school. Being a girl, I had to take homemaking. I was not allowed to take mechanical drawing, which was for boys. But we had a retired architect living across the street from us. And he gave me my first drafting board and T-square and triangles and taught me the basics of architectural drawing. Now, fast forward to my true architectural education, which is quite global. I started at Scripps College in Claremont in California, and then went to Hamburg University in Germany, and then Istanbul Technical University in Turkey, and then back to California to wrap up at UC Berkeley. So I think that that experience of studying where in places where English was a second language really was a good foundation for my life as an expatriate. But more importantly, I think what I learned was that we as human beings are far more similar than we are different because of our cultures. And that reinforced my passion for designing for people.
Oh, I love that. Designing for people. I actually think this, from what I've seen, I think this philosophy really shines through your work. And I'll ask you a little bit later about your human-centric spaces. But first, can you give us a sense of what it was like trying to get your first job in what was clearly a male-dominated industry?
Yes, it was. In those days, architectural firms did not hire women because they might be a distraction in the drafting room.
This is a drafting room here that we're seeing,
yes,
right?
It was like that. But I just kept going to interviews, and I finally found a job, initially with a small firm. But over the years, I worked my way up. I became licensed. I worked myself into the position of being a project architect, where I was coordinating the work of the architectural design, the engineering, and the construction with the engineers, the contractors, the other consultants. And that really led the way for me to advance.
Right. After all that traveling, did you then go straight to Hong Kong?
No,
after that? Okay.
I didn't. No, I didn't. I worked for a number of years in the US, but then I went to Iran and I was a partner in a small architectural firm there. And interestingly, while I was in Iran, I was also involved with the US-based Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat. And they sent me to Hong Kong for a month as a visiting research scholar to really understand how tall buildings were developing in Hong Kong.
Amazing.
And while I was here in Hong Kong, interviewing these various architectural firms, they said to me, if you come back, we have a job for you.
Okay.
Because things were booming.
Yeah.
Well, when I went back to Iran, the Iranian Revolution was really getting underway. And when Khomeini came into power in 79, as an American, I was no longer welcome.
Right.
As a woman, I couldn't continue practicing architecture. And remembering what I'd heard in Hong Kong, I knew that as it was a time for me to leave, I would go to Hong Kong. So that's how I got to Hong Kong.
Right. And then when we were preparing for our chat today, you were telling me about how the American Chamber and the US business community here in Hong Kong was really inextricably linked to your decision to set up on your own in Hong Kong. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, when I arrived in Hong Kong, it looked like this, quite different from today.
Oh, I love that photo.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just opening up China to American businesses. Now, I got a job quite quickly with Wong Tung and Partners, whom I'd interviewed the previous year for the Council on Tall Buildings. But I then started attending AmCham's lunches.
Right.
And meeting all of these American businessmen who were coming into Hong Kong because they wanted to expand their businesses into China. And they saw Hong Kong as the entrepot. Mm-hmm. My entrepreneurial instincts saw an opportunity. As an American architect, I understood what they needed. I knew how to get it done in Hong Kong by then. And so in 1981, I opened a small office so that we could create and actually deliver offices for some of these people who were establishing in Hong Kong so they could get into China.
Right.
And it was through those AmCham contacts that we got our first projects. At the time, we also did a few architectural projects. And some of our viewers today may be familiar with the American Country Club, which I did with William Turnbull of California. But it was really the demand from the growing expatriate business community, US-based and other internationally based business community here in Hong Kong that drove our growth. And at the time, even though we were still doing everything in the office by hand, and you can see we had no computers. It was all hand drawing, all hand drafting, right?
Yeah.
But we continued to develop and grow with the clientele of the expatriate community here in Hong Kong. And actually, State Street Bank was one of our early clients, and we've continued to do work for State Street around the world. This particular project was very interesting because not only did we do the design, but the client also asked us to be responsible for the construction and to deliver the entire project, to be responsible for that. So that is how we added construction management to our services.
So with this phase of growth, what then triggered the expansion out of Hong Kong?
It was a woman. One of our very good women in Hong Kong decided to relocate to Taiwan.
Right.
So rather than lose her, we said, why don't you look around and see if Taiwan would be a good place for us to open an office? She looked around. She said, yes, it's quite possible. And so we said, let's go ahead. And she opened Moser Associates in Taiwan for us. A few years later, she emigrated to Canada. And now our Taipei office is headed by Antonia Su. And she and her team are doing projects for many multinationals, including Google, IBM, Hewlett-Packard, and others. And actually, right now, they're doing 1.5 million square feet of R&D offices for TSMC in Taiwan.
1.5 million.
1.5
okay,
million.
That's okay, math, right. Amazing. Amazing. When I first looked at your website, I saw that it was clear that people are not just at the core of your design, but that people are also at the core of your business, and especially your business growth. And that was a great example. I was particularly impressed with the phenomenal women that are featured on your website and that you can see are in your teams around the world. As you've grown globally, can you tell us a bit more about some of the other women leaders at Moser?
Oh, yes. Well, the global growth itself has really made it essential for us to be able to communicate and to collaboratively work together globally, no matter where our people are. And it's Joanne Choi who has created and continues to lead our technology. This is Joanne, yes, and continues to lead the development of our technology, communications, and methodologies. And, you know, IT is a man's world, pretty much. But Joanne's leadership, I think, in this area is somewhat unusual, but very successful. She has people and her global team in all of our offices around the world so that we can not only communicate, but actually work together, collaborate together, no matter where our people are globally. The only thing that we haven't been able to overcome is the time zone problem.
Okay, well, there's very little we can do about that. Actually, I love that because we often talk about barriers in the workplace. So if time zone is your one barrier, then that's a fantastic step forward. I'm also really enjoying hearing about your approach to building a culture that empowers women to take on roles regardless of the business stream, especially when it sounds like in Joanne's case, you know, what is a really critical support system. Can you tell us something about some of the groundbreaking projects that the women at Moser have been leading?
Oh, sure. Well, here, Hong Kong, we see Hong Kong now as a part of the Greater Bay Area. Okay, And so our teams in the Greater Bay Area are composed of individuals who are in Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and Hong Kong, mixed together. Now, Karen Ng is the leader of one of our teams, our Greater Bay Area teams, and she has actually created for South China Morning Post, she and her team have created a really what I think was a very, very important workplace to allow them to move from what was a paper-based culture to a digital culture as well. This is where understanding how the work is actually changing for our clients is so important for us to be able to create the workplace that will support them. And really understanding that and then integrating it into the design and the engineering of the workplace.
That's a really interesting point. So, since 1981, you've been focused on workplace design that is transforming the way people work. And I really think that this intersection between work and space and people is very fascinating. Actually, my own team have recently, or the last year, because of COVID, we moved into a co-working space. So innovation in the workplace is something that I'm personally really interested in. And especially how you engage your team or teams through the space or spaces where they work. But what I'd really like to understand from you is how do you then understand your clients' new workspaces needs?
Well, the South China Morning Post is an interesting example. We are workplace strategists who coordinate very closely with the client and with our designers. They were holding workshops, which is something we've been doing for quite a few years, to really look deeply into the detail of how the client organization, how those individuals work and how they want to work in the future. And then collaborating with our designers and our engineers to create the workspace that will support that. The other thing is that recently, because of COVID, we haven't been able to have these face-to-face workshops. So what we've done is to create apps that will gamify the interactions, and that actually allows more people to participate.
Well, that's fantastic. That's an upside. And I'm sure that this gamification and employee engagement in that process will be something that really resonates with our audience. And I think probably something else that you do amazingly well that will also resonate with the audience is your approach to and leadership within sustainability and wellness. Can you tell us how sustainability and wellness is relevant to the workspace?
Very relevant, very relevant. If you don't have a healthy workplace, your people are not going to be able to perform to their best. Right. So our sustainability and wellness has really been driven and is led by Christine Bruckner. She has a global team throughout the organization.
Another amazing woman.
Another amazing woman, yes. We're talking about women today, right? And, she has brought us leadership attention in areas, particularly LEAD for environment and WELL for interior wellness. We're very, very strong in these areas, as well as RESET and other sort of certification arrangements in different places in the world. And now also with the, we've become signatories to the COP26 communique, because the focus on carbon footprint, going for net carbon zero, is becoming more and more important for all our clients. So we are very involved in following up on that as well.
Maybe can we see maybe an example of this?
Okay, for our LEAD and WELL particularly. Now, this is interesting. This is Citi in Hong Kong, and we've done work for Citi for many years in different locations. For their headquarters in Hong Kong, Citi asked us to designed to achieve LEED Gold certification.
Right.
But we went beyond that.
Okay.
With our design and our engineering, we were able to give them LEED Platinum, which is the highest level, and also WELL certification, Reset certification, several awards. So I think, you know, putting it all together, I think this has been a very important development that we use. And City is just one example.
That's fantastic. So it's not just about your organization winning awards, it's also about the impact that you have on your clients. And
it's important for them as well, because it's important for them because then it's easier for them to, number one, attract staff and retain staff if they have a healthy environment. Yeah. It's also their corporate social responsibility is being met.
Yeah.
So in many ways, it really is, it's a win-win for everybody.
But you mentioned earlier the Greater Bay Area. Can you tell us a bit more about your story in the rest of China?
Yes. Well, we originally went into China working for US clients and other multinationals. But over the past decade, we've seen a tremendous growth in China's private sector businesses, and they've become very important clients for us. Now, in Guangzhou, we did a project for Tencent, which I think is quite interesting, in the sense that we took a number of old abandoned warehouses, you can see on the upper left there, and converted them into a very active and forward-looking workplace campus for Tencent.
Wow.
And that's adaptive reuse of old buildings, by the way. Now, we've continued to work for Tencent as well. And currently, our Yoki Chan here in the Hong Kong office is leading a team that is coordinating, designing the interior and coordinating the work of Tencent's other consultants for 1.2 million square feet for their development in Shenzhen, Shanghai.
Right.
Now, in fact, we've seen that this coordination, this integration of the disciplines is really the way to go, bringing everybody together into what we call integrated project delivery. And we're doing that more and more in China. Our deputy head of China, Doris Wong, also a woman, is focusing on growing our capability in that area. And an example that we have recently completed is for Lilith Games, which I'm happy to say has also just won an award for design excellence from the AIA International region. So let's take a look at what we've done with Lilith.
There's a joint on the corner where the big boys play, where the whiskey's running like the river, but they all never come for the booze and bass. I'm the one, I'm the lady that'll rock this place, that'll rock this place, rock this place, rock this place, rock this place.
I should point out that these clips can be viewed in full on your website. And I really do highly recommend them as they are pretty inspirational. But talking of inspirational, can you tell us a little bit more about the Moser women who are expanding your global reach?
Well, from here in Hong Kong, for example, our recent growth into Australia, expansion into Australia, has been led by women. Number one, Hannah Gibson, one of our very good workplace strategists here in Hong Kong, returned to Melbourne with her husband, and she continued working with us from Melbourne. But we saw that this might be an opportunity for our growth in Australia. So Wendy Leung, one of our directors here in Hong Kong, took up the mantle and said, she had been educated in Australia before she had returned to Hong Kong. So she took up the challenge and she opened up our office in Melbourne, and now we've expanded to Sydney as well. And even during the pandemic, she went there in 2018, right just before the pandemic started. And so in spite of that, we've been growing and doing projects for clients like Nutanix and who else do I have up there? Oh, a number of other US clients, quite a few US clients and other international clients and Australian clients as well.
What I wanted to shift to, because you've got this amazing global growth, but is there one key consideration that you would share with the audience in order to successfully and sustainably manage this scale of global growth?
The key is the integration of all the disciplines, from the architecture to the interiors, to the structure, to the mechanical systems. And that means that we integrate the work of the people who are doing that. This has led also to more architectural projects, such as what we did in China for Nokia, where they asked us to create a 750,000 square foot facility for them in the outskirts of Beijing. So we created an environment not only for workplace, but also for testing their equipment, for meetings, for eating, for socializing, a complete workplace environment to support them. And I think it was the integration of this that was so important, the integration of all of the aspects of it. And this project actually was the first LEED Gold certified new build commercial building in China.
Wow, that's really impressive.
But we've gone on actually more recently here in Hong Kong. We have done the Li Po Chun College.
Yeah.
And I am happy to say it has just received an AIA Hong Kong Chapter Award for interior architecture and sustainability.
Fantastic.
And for this project, we integrated very closely the architecture, the interiors, and the landscape, and with sustainability at the forefront.
Well, I'm personally quite familiar with Li Po Chun. My two children, one is still studying there, and one has just recently graduated. And they, as students there, they tell me what an amazing space it is. And it really is a warm and welcoming space, which is something that you need when you're in a stressful learning environment. But I haven't been able to set foot onto campus over this last year or so because of COVID. And obviously the reason for that is to protect students and make sure that there's a safe learning environment as well. But how have you seen COVID impacting your clients' concerns? Are there new concerns about keeping their workspace safe for their employees?
Well, this is definitely a growing concern. And so we are using our offices as living labs to develop solutions. Here in Hong Kong, for example, we have created an environment that basically automatically responds in real time to the occupancy of the space by connecting the sensors and the mechanical systems so that we can maintain a healthy environment based on where people are in the workplace. And here you'll see in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see Cherry Leung, one of our engineers who's very involved in developing this project.
Yeah, I have to say there's a perfect temperature in this from where we're sitting right now. It's really great. We actually started this conversation by looking back. And now I'd like us to look forward. Everyone's talking about the hybrid office and asking what is the office of the future? It's a really big question, but how would you go about answering it?
Well, over our 40 years, we've seen the nature of work change dramatically. And now it is changing even more rapidly. I think with the help of artificial intelligence and technology to a great extent. And I think what we have to do, or what we actually are doing, is we're asking clients, how is your work changing? And how do you want the office environment to support that change? And how do you want the office environment to support your culture? Right? Because everybody wants to keep their culture in spite of all the changes. Right? So this is really a very important aspect. And it's going to continue to change rapidly. Everything is going to continue to change rapidly. So we have to be open to that and try to be at the forefront of all of these changes to help our clients. Now, I've talked today about women in leadership positions in Hong Kong and the region. And of course, we have women in leadership positions in other parts of the world as well. And we have men in leadership positions too. Let's not forget the other half. Yeah. And I've talked about projects here in Hong Kong, in China, and in the region, but we also have forward-looking projects in other parts of the world as well, of course. And I'd like to leave you, with one of these projects that we have done in California. This is for LinkedIn, California, my home state, which has beautiful weather. And this is a wonderful example of an agile office. Let's see what it looks like.
I love it. Just pack up the room and just take it back inside with you. It's really, really very innovative and very, very, as I said earlier, very inspiring. Thank you so much, Moira, for taking us on this journey and introducing us as well to so many of your phenomenal women that you work with. The theme of the Women of Influence Awards ceremony and series events leading up to it is Invest in All of Us. Before we go to the chat box, and I can see some questions starting to come in, please do keep them coming. I would like to ask you a couple of questions myself, starting with the culture that you've built that empowers women to achieve their full potential. Have you got any tips for our audience on what they could do to empower and invest in the women in their organization?
Well, actually, we don't specialize in investing in women. We invest in all of our people. For us, gender is irrelevant, religion is irrelevant, ethnicity is irrelevant. We're all a bunch of individuals, and each of us is unique. So what we need to do is to invest in the unique potential of each individual, so that they are able to be as successful as possible, and their success will contribute to the success of the firm. Yeah. So it's a win-win situation. Right?
You mentioned Joanne earlier on. Can you tell us a bit more about her and how she's been able to sort of celebrate and grow and follow her passions?
It's quite interesting. She joined us initially as a young designer. And so she began to understand what it is that we need in terms of our communication. But her passion, her interest in technology and being able to communicate using technology became very apparent. And so we said, okay, since this is your very deep interest, why don't we go in that direction? Let's develop this. Right. We need this. And so, and this is a very important point. We don't find round pegs to fit in round holes, okay? If someone has a particular passion that is not quite in line with what they are following when they first come to us, we said, okay, how can this passion help us to grow? Let's involve that as well.
Yeah.
And that's how Joanne did.
So it really is people-led at
definitely. We have nothing but people.
Yeah.
We don't sell shoes.
Yeah. Yeah, people are, yeah, you can't move forward without your people.
That's true.
I discovered when I was preparing for this fireside chat that you have an amazing podcast called Place of Work. And once you've looked at the clips on the website, then go and listen to the podcast. There's some really, really meaty topics on there. There's workplace innovation, psychological safety through design, and inclusivity at work. And one of the episodes that I listened to recently, the conversation focused on why companies must see an inclusive workplace as a vital part of the business in order to create real impact and value. So before you all rush off to go and listen to the podcast, can you give us a taster of what companies can do to ensure that their workplace is actually inclusive?
To us, inclusiveness means recognize every individual, not as, oh, that's a person is a designer or that person is a project manager. That's Sally, that's David, that's Daniel, that's Alice, and each one of them has a name. And I think the most important thing is to actually identify individuals, understand their strengths, respect their weaknesses, find out their passions, and help those individuals to grow. That's what creates inclusivity, starting with the name, not the category, not the title, but the name.
It's really interesting because I've spoken to quite a few business leaders over a few years. And, often people talk about, obviously needing to remember people's names, but the way that you really do emphasize and are very, very deliberate about making sure that people's names are celebrated, their successes are attached to their names as well. So really, that's a big takeaway for me from our conversations.
One way that we do that, for example, when we've won an important project, we send a notification around, a newsflash around to all of our people globally. And we include the names of all of the individuals who have participated in helping us to win that project.
Right.
So we recognize them by name to everyone in the organization.
I love it. You're quoted as saying, buildings are for people. We experience them and they have an influence on us. Can you tell us a bit more about how this human-centric philosophy influences your design and your thinking around it, and also what your clients experience when they first come to Moser Associates?
Well, the first part of your question, okay. Imagine that this room is entirely gray and the carpet is gray and the windows are small. We're not going to have such an energetic conversation in that environment, right? So definitely the workplace, what you can see, what you can feel, whether it's too cold, too hot, or there's a lot of noise, or all of the air is coming right down on the top of your head. These things are going to affect your ability to really perform at the maximum, the best you possibly can do. So that's why the workplace itself is such an important aspect of how we feel and how we interact and how we perform. Now, the second part of your question.
Yeah, how do your clients, what's their experience when they first come to you?
Well, I think they're surprised,
right?
Because we approach things in quite a different way. Instead of just asking them, what would you like us to do? We say, as I mentioned earlier, how are you working? How would you like to work in the future? How can we help you to create an environment that will really support your aspirations and help all of the people in your organization?
I have some amazing questions coming through that I'm just going to pick up from our audience. In no particular order, Gosh, there are a lot. It's fantastic. This one here. Are there any elements from traditional offices, in inverted commas, such as those from your early career that you would like to bring back into contemporary office environments?
Elements from the early offices. My gosh, I never look back. I'm always looking forward.
Keep going, right?
I certainly don't want to bring back cubicles.
No.
I think it's really much more exciting to look ahead.
Yeah.
And see what are the new ways of working. And, there's very little in the past. Sometimes there is a design element that may be specific to a particular culture that you want to incorporate into the workplace for the comfort and the sensibilities of the people working in that area, in that location. But in general, I think that looking forward is a lot more productive than looking backward.
Well, on that point, there's another question, and actually we have touched quite a bit on technology and the future of digital. And there's one question here that I'd like to pick up. So how important is evolving with technology and going fully digital? And also with regards to continuing education of staff and helping them to be digital savvy or streamlining processes, being faster, having less waste. Is this something that is a topic of conversation that you're having a lot of the time?
Well, I would say this. If you look at, and this is true for any business, I think, if you look at the cost of your people and the importance of your people to your business versus the cost of technology, there's a huge difference, okay? So we invest in technology that will support what our people are doing. And I think and the technology is going to continue to advance. So we have to be really on top of what is the newest thing that will be relevant, not because it's a gimmick, but because it will be relevant to what we do. And I would say that this is going to be true for any business as work changes. What we're seeing is that more and more artificial intelligence and robotic automation is taking over the routine, repetitive work.
Yeah.
Do you remember they used to be typists?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you remember they used to be tellers and now we have ATMs?
Yeah, I don't want to show my age too much, but yes. Yeah.
Well, okay. So what that means is that businesses, all businesses, I think, are going to be focusing more and more, have more and more people who are looking at innovation and creativity and how they can pull the business forward into the future. The repetitive work is going to be done more and more by artificial intelligence. And so this creates a different sort of demand for a different sort of workplace. I think maybe that answers the question.
Yeah, and similar or related question. Everyone's talking about the hybrid office.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, what is next for the office as a hybrid and work from home model? And I'm having this conversation with people every single day about how many days are you working in the office, at home, remotely, because in Hong Kong, for example, home is not always a convenient space for work. But what do you see this hybrid between office and home?
Well, it isn't just one thing. I mean, hybrid is only another name for what's happening, a simple name. But I think what we see is that you're not going to find one solution in a couple of months.
Yeah.
What will happen, I believe, and we talk about this all the time, is that the way people think they are going to be coming back to the office or working from home will probably it'll be that way for maybe the first couple of months. And then it's going to evolve and change. The patterns will change between working from home or other locations and working in the office itself. So what we're looking at is developing an adaptive approach, not just flexible, but adaptive, to be able to adapt to these changes that are going to happen more rapidly over time. Now, clients, I think, may be worried about, okay, we're going to redo the office, we'll do it this way, but it's not going to last. And so I think we have to be looking at a continual evolution, at least for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I agree. Can I just pick up on a word that you used there about adaptive? And you've talked about this with adaptive design, and going back to what I loved what you said earlier about your office being a living lab. Can you tell us a bit more about that? And some, like we were in your office, which I absolutely love. Things hanging from the ceiling for exercising, and can you tell us a bit about what the features are here that you're really proud of, and how adaptive design, what that looks like in your office here?
Well, we are, number one, when we moved here originally, we created a lot of our own desking in ways that would allow us to reconfigure and have stand sit or different combinations. And actually now we're, as with many of the furniture manufacturers are doing this too, putting them on casters so that we can move things around much more easily. But it's not only the physical arrangement, it's also the engineered environment, if you will. Are you going to have enough air in this area? Are you going to have enough light in that area? So creating an environment that can adapt both in the physical arrangement and in the engineered environment that's really what we're experimenting with in our own offices as living labs, and getting a proof of concept so that we are now beginning to provide this for some of our clients.
Sounds, it's a great place to be. Interesting question here. So as a firm, what does Moser, or what do you aim for in the coming 10 or 20 years? Ooh, big question.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think I'll retire in 20 years, but not yet. Not yet. It's too much fun. I think that I hope, and I have hoped from the very beginning, from 40 years ago, my goal has always been to create a firm that can continue in leading the way long after I am gone. Now, I don't know what that life is going to be like in 20 years. It's going to be very, very different from what it is today. It's almost impossible to imagine what it will be like. But we need to continually evolve so that we can, there will always be businesses of one sort or another, and we always want to be there to help them with their workplace facilities, whether it's an office or a building or an entire campus, or for example, here's an interesting situation. We are doing the environmental best practice guidelines for Tenovatec for their very, very large campus that they are developing in China, which is actually a small neighborhood, right? It's not even just a business campus. It's much more than that. So wherever we see an opportunity to actually move ahead as things are changing and provide the services that will help our clients so they can move ahead as well, that's where we're going.
Well, there's a question that's come through, and thank you for these questions. Please do keep them coming, but there are a number of them. This one, do companies embrace change management in their process for transformation to new ways of work, or would you like to see more?
Well, when we actually, change management starts for us when we are doing the workplace strategy investigations or discovery, I would say, with the client, because we need to incorporate their thinking and present them with what ifs. And that in itself is an aspect of change management. So it isn't something that, okay, here's the new office. We have to get people to accept it when they come in. It isn't something that just happens at the end. It actually starts at the very beginning and works through so that people are comfortable with the physical environment and the technological environment that we provide for them.
And it's adaptive, and they've been involved, employees been involved in the thought process in the beginning. Here's an interesting one. As more companies or countries, it's companies / countries, pledge carbon neutral goals, how will embodied carbon tracking be implemented into the design process?
Well, it's actually happening a lot more rapidly with base building architecture. It is beginning to happen as well with the many hundreds of thousands of providers of products for interiors, that they are beginning to give the embodied carbon rating of their own material. And so we amalgamate that information as best we can, given the amount that is available now in the public domain. And I think that is going to continue to grow, that level of information, so that we can actually advise our clients on, well, okay, if you want to achieve the embodied carbon rating or reduce the embodied carbon of the workplace that we're creating for you, here are the options. If you go this way, it's going to be more embodied carbon. If you go that way, it's going to be less. So we can't make the decision for them, but we can provide them with the options, with the information.
I've got one question, and I want to, I think that you've probably got a really great answer for this, but earlier when we were discussing about when there's a question that you've been asked over the years that potentially frustrates you, and you said, what is it like being a female architect? And the question that's come through is, how do young female architects break through the glass ceiling in the world of design? And I don't want to dismiss the question, because it's a really important question about young architects coming through, but do you see that there's a difference between now in this world where, back to your 1960s drafting room, it was very clearly male dominated. What does it look like now for aspiring architects or leaders in the industry?
Much more opportunity. And on that point, I really get frustrated when people ask me, what's it like to be a woman architect? And I want to say, what's it like to be a man architect? Come on, I'm an architect. Just like a poet is a poet, whether it's a man or a woman. An architect is an architect, whether it's a man or a woman.
We talked a little bit earlier about your keep going mantra and growth mindset as well. And how do you kind of see the two coming together, where you're keeping going, but then you sometimes have to change course if the direction that you're going isn't necessarily working? How does that work for you? What does that look like?
Well, keep going doesn't mean straight line. Okay, it means move ahead, even if it's only one step, before you find the circumstances have changed and you have to take a side step to keep going, and before you can move ahead again. It's keep going is don't let things hold you back.
Yeah.
That's really what it means.
Yeah, and being comfortable with change, with all experience quite a lot of change.
Sure.
Yeah, changing course.
I mean, it doesn't make sense to say, I'm only going to go in this direction, because circumstances will change and you will have to adjust. So I think it's very important to not be afraid of change, to not feel that change means you're not being very smart.
Yeah.
It's really smart to change when circumstances require it.
Yeah. Okay. We talked a little bit about the culture that you've built, and there's a great question that's come through. Can you talk more about how the workspace can reflect or influence corporate culture? Is it just about building something with amenities that employees enjoy spending time in?
I think that the creating a physical environment where it is easy for people to interact really can support a culture. We find, for example, that more and more of the workplaces that we are designing have informal areas where you can just go with your laptop and sit there and work. You don't have to work at a particular position.
Yeah.
You can be anywhere in the organization. And as creative and innovative people come together in an office environment, oh, that's a great idea. Let's sit down and talk about that. You need a place to sit down and talk about that.
Yeah.
Right? It's not, well, I have to go back to my workstation. Right? So I think that creating the workplace that allows people to really comfortably move around and rub shoulders.
Yeah.
It used to be called the water cooler.
Yeah.
Conversation
yeah.
Where you get a great idea, right? So I think that this will happen more and more throughout the workplace. And that's how I think the environment can really influence the way people can be more innovative, productive, creative.
And collaborative as well. There's a real sense of communication. Certainly, walking through your office, you can see that it's set up for people to be able to communicate with each other.
Yes.
On the subject of communication, I was listening to a conversation earlier this week about through COVID and needing to be really present and communicate and over communicate with your teams and be able to sort of share your authentic self. It seems that that's a philosophy that for you hasn't just come about because of COVID, that it's always been something that's important to you. How do you kind of bring your whole self to work and then role model that other people can bring their whole selves to work and be their authentic selves in the workplace? What does that
mean? Me personally?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't know. You'd have to ask our people. Really. I mean, I am who I am, and they all know that.
And communication channels, how do you kind of communicate?
Oh, there are no channels.
Right. Oh, I like that. Okay,
no channels.
Tell us more.
My door is always open. Okay.
Yeah.
I do have an office because I communicate. I'm often talking with people in our other offices. I am old school. I have to admit it. I'm more comfortable having an office. Yeah. But as you can see, it's all glass.
Yeah.
So, and the door is always open. So, and I walk around a lot.
Yeah.
In the office and talk to people, see what they're doing. So I suppose that in a sense is setting an example.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. People know that they can come to you and you're there for them, but you're also able to communicate. I like the fact that there's no communication channels. It's
no channels.
Yeah. So sometimes in my conversations, the focus is on the communication tools and what's working, what's not. Too much WhatsApp and leaking into personal time and work time and trying to find that that balance can be quite difficult. But I don't think it's about the tools or the channels. It's about the mindset.
Yes.
About wanting to communicate.
Yes. Yes.
But touching on work-life balance, I mean, personally, I did away with that term many years ago and think more about work-life integration. Do you think about balance, integration, or is it something
I think integration is a much better word, particularly here in Hong Kong, in Asia in general. There is a much greater integration of the personal life and the work life. People have friends in the workplace. It's not, okay, I work until 6 o'clock and then I go home and I have a separate life, or I go out and I have a separate life. There's a lot more integration of the work and the personal life. And I think we foster that as well. For example, for our Christmas party, the people bring their spouse or their best, whoever it is, and their children as well. We celebrate the birth of children to our staff. Oh, isn't that great and beautiful? We send the pictures around and everybody enjoys them. And actually, we've seen over the 40 years, I can tell you, we've seen some of these children grow up and go to college and become adults.
Personally, I've learned about my comfort zone, and where in the past I would think about stepping out of it. A few years ago, I learned from somebody that instead of thinking about stepping out of it, just think about expanding it. And so with every new learning, you're just expanding your comfort zone every single day. Is there something that you've learned along the way that has helped you to evolve the way that you think or the way that you that work?
Well, that's a very interesting, I like that, expanding rather than stepping out of the comfort zone.
Makes it less scary to do new things.
Possibly, yeah. I know it's always a challenge to move ahead because you're afraid that you're not going to be as successful doing the new things as you were doing the old things. But in fact, if you have an environment of people who are supportive and who are there to help you succeed, it does make it easier. Right? And I have seen this over and over again. I'm sure I've gone through it too. I know I've gone through it, but I've seen it with so many of our people as they grow. They're continually, repeatedly stepping beyond their comfort zone or expanding their comfort zone. I like that phrase. That's a good phrase. And the thing that is very important is to give them support in that. And to not expect them to immediately be as successful in that new area, that new role, as they have been.
Yes.
Right?
Very good point.
Very, very important. Don't worry. You'll learn very quickly. We're there to help. Right?
Yeah, that phase of growth and learning and failure is really important to be able to actually get to the next space. We've got time for just one more maybe. How does Moser use data to analyze the use of a space?
This is very interesting. Fortunately, sensors are becoming a lot more affordable and a lot more accurate.
Right.
So this is an interesting development of technology. In the old days, we used to hire on a short-term basis college students to go into a client office and actually say, okay, 4 people went into the meeting room in the client's office and they were there for 3 hours. 2 people went in and they were there for 15 minutes. And
you were ahead of the curve with collating data.
We were collecting data by hand. Now, of course, we can do it with sensors.
Right. Is the follow-on question, is the importance of indoor air quality going to increase in the coming years?
Absolutely.
How do you see this space evolving?
Absolutely. So many almost all of our commercial buildings in the last 20 years have been designed to reduce the amount of air to what was basically necessary. But unfortunately, the calculation of what was basically necessary is below par.
Right, okay.
So we need to be providing more fresh air in the workplace. For those of us who are stuck in buildings, and we will be for a long time, that have been built 10, 20 years ago, we need to be able to redistribute the air according to the actual occupancy. If you have a meeting room designed for 12 people that is empty for half a day, why fill it full of fresh air when everybody is congregating over in this other area of the office? So the redistribution of what we have is the number one place to go. The number two place to go is to bring in a lot more fresh air. We're doing this, actually, just found out, we're doing this for a project for Disney in Hammersmith in London, actually providing a new system for the entire introduction of fresh air into the building. An old building,
right,
that we're converting for them, and it includes this attention to a lot more fresh air.
I fear that we have to start to bring this to a close. There's so much.
I could go on forever.
I know, it's really, really. I can't tell you what a pleasure it's been, not just today, but leading up to today and the preparation for this.
It's fun working with you, believe me.
Oh, thank you so much. I really have enjoyed it, and I've learned a huge amount in this short space of time. Really want to thank you for welcoming us all into your office, for your candid sharing as well. And then, as I said earlier, taking us on this journey through the world of design. Thank you, Moira. And have a fantastic rest of your day.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.